can't tell you how much it gives me an internal just like hurt and rage. Like, how dare you even think that you can say that to my face or say that to anyone who's had to watch our homelands and our families been murdered, not just murdered, in the most vicious, disgusting ways. A man on an IV, a young man, 19 years old, who loved to play guitar and who was an engineering student and who dreamed of, dreams like any other 19-year-old, was burned alive while attached to an IV. I mean, how does it get worse? Are we not human to you people?
Welcome to One in Tribe. I am your host, Julie Fidalgo, and today I am honored to have Alexandra J. Tomé as my guest. Alexandra is the founder and director of Azaid NGO in Lebanon, which focuses on child protection, mental health, education, and youth empowerment in Palestinian camp Nar el Bared and in Akkad, North Lebanon. I hope I said that right. She comes with a long career in international law and human rights, diplomacy, and emergency response. She previously worked as a Lebanese delegate to the United Nations Security Council, negotiating with the P5 and other nations. She has an undergrad degree from George Washington University with cum laude honors and master's from Columbia University. Wow. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Alexandra. Welcome.
Thank you, Julie. It's an honor to be here with you, and you are a very inspiring person and new friend, so I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Well, today is a big day for Lebanon, but before we jump into that, there's a lot to talk about. I just want our audience to get a little bit of history about you. You sound like an American. You can pass for an American, but you are actually Lebanese. So if you can please just share a little bit about your history, I would really appreciate that.
Absolutely. So my amazing parents, born and raised in Lebanon, my entire ancestry is Lebanese, so full-blooded. But during the 15-year war that started in 1975 in Lebanon, they had to flee. So they fled, landed in New Jersey, just outside of Manhattan in northern New Jersey, where we already had some kind of family presence. So, at that time, it's very challenging to know where to go, tend to follow people you may know, and Lebanese community, which we did have. So I was very blessed to grow up with a very strong Lebanese community in New Jersey and in New York City. And then I guess we always joke within my family that I have two amazing brothers, but that I was always kind of the crazy one that was attracted to go back to a very unstable yet beautiful place, which is our homeland, Lebanon. So I guess to fast forward, after I completed my studies, I did serve as a Lebanese delegate to the United Nations. At a very exciting time, Lebanon was on the Security Council for the first time in 52 years. So fresh out of college, this was a very exciting moment for me to essentially dive deep into international law. And this is extremely relevant today because we see it being broken, it being humiliated by the state of Israel every single day. And it's very important that now these topics are back to relevance, that the ICC has issued arrest warrants for not only Netanyahu, but his ex-defense minister. But anyway, without getting sidetracked into international law, it also started my passion for the law, because I see it as a text, as a very intelligent intellectual creation, which accepts that wars happen. It's not actually idealistic. People should really take the time to look into it. And you can, check out the Geneva Conventions. The International Committee does a great job of posting online a lot of materials, but essentially it's saying that, look, war has always happened. Conflict has always been a means that humans resolve disputes. However, we can set some restrictions and some limitations as to how we act so that we don't act completely barbaric. And international law in that context sets out stipulations that civilians are not a target. Hospitals and schools are not a target, that only appropriate military targets are a reasonable target in that sense. So anyway, this has now come back to the light, which is very important, but it really inspired me to move back to Lebanon to work in human rights. Unfortunately, seeing that the UN doesn't hold as much power as it should, I chose to really work on the ground and actually touch lives. It's just for me was the biggest, it's been the biggest honor of my life. I'm proud of my work, but I'm proud more of the communities that we serve. They have taught me everything in life that, humbles me, everything that kind of changed my world perspective. Um, and I think also was kind of the perfect full circle to my upbringing by parents who were raised in a war, who also, every day still teach me so much about life. And I feel like what we need now is that humility, where we need to learn from people who have went through war. Because if we don't, we will see numbers only. And the numbers are staggering and they are important. Even just looking at Gaza, the Lancet, which is the British medical report, says the figures are over 180,000 killed in Gaza, not 40,000. So the numbers are important, but if we don't learn the stories of people from war, we will never really understand what's going on and we will never find a solution because the solutions will keep being made by those who have all of the money and all of the weapons rather than those who are the most affected.
Fascinating. It's so inspiring what you do, and I really admire you for your work. Now, how long did you end up staying in Lebanon?
So essentially, I started in Beirut. I worked for this amazing think tank. I was a part of a movement in Lebanon that was building an oppositional political party to run in elections and fight the corruption. Um, and just the relevance of that today is really important when people look at Hezbollah and all the different actors in Lebanon. It's important to remember that the Lebanese deserve sovereignty over our country and decisions over who govern us. And the Lebanese are very capable of making those decisions. Actually, one of the biggest movements for our self governance was only interrupted by COVID, by the pandemic. And it was a 2019 massive revolution in the streets of Beirut where the people said enough is enough of all the political parties and that we have a very intelligent, a very creative, a very passionate population of people that we love Lebanon. I mean, if you meet a Lebanese, like you feel it, the energy. It's just, there's something about our country, no matter how messed up it is, we are just so attached. So we are very much capable and passionate about taking care of our country. But anyway, sorry, to answer your question, it's very difficult to not go on side tangents about the situation, but to again focus on your question
We'll
about,
get there.
yes, okay. So I moved to the north and my approach to Found Azahir was really to let the communities drive what is their challenge, identify the challenges, identify with me what the solutions are. So, it was over a decade-long project, essentially, of building Azahir from a grassroots perspective, let the youth, who are my stellar team of young people, Lebanese and Palestinian, in North Lebanon, which is the poorest part of the country. I was attracted to it for two reasons. One, my father's from Tripoli, so my roots are in the north. My mother is from the beautiful Shuf Mountains, from a village called Del Amar. But being from the north, which also I learned was, right now over 70% people living under the poverty line. Poverty in Lebanon has tripled across the country, but the north has felt it really the most. It's been cut off economically from other parts of the country. And at the time when I was building Ezahir, there were massive populations of Syrian refugees entering the country at that time. So I was curious to see how are the poorest communities in Lebanon hosting refugees? How is this not, blown up into an all-out violent situation? You just have communities really taking care of each other. And I wanted to help and I wanted to let them teach me how I can help them.
Wow. Incredible, incredible work. It's just, I am like so drawn to people like you that are out there to make the world a better place, starting with Lebanon, which, as some audience members might know, I am Lebanese, fifth generation Brazilian, but it is one of the most beautiful countries in the world. And it's just such a pity that they are stuck in the middle and people are constantly just, you know, creating wars over there. So today is a big day. Today, there was a ceasefire. Go for it, girl. I am going to give you the floor.
Um, so first, I'll just answer personally since this is a more personal podcast and humanizing the Arab people. Um, I still feel a darkness over me or a shadow of grief. I can't really celebrate yet. I'm not I don't think anything celebratory has happened in the past 14 months. However, it does warm my heart to see videos of displaced people literally celebrating. And I'll tell you why. In the past 12 months, Israel has caused such an amount of destruction on Lebanon. I've been through the 2006 war. My parents have been through the 80s and the 70s wars. Nothing of this scale has happened. And I just want to offer sort of a comparison to understand. So, Lebanon is about 4,036 square miles, right? Afghanistan is 252,071 square miles. It's twice the size of the United Kingdom. Lebanon is 3/4 the size of New Jersey. At one point when Israel escalated, it's been bombing for the past 13 months, but it escalated in September of this year. It carried out about 3,000 strikes on Lebanon in just 2 days. That was in September. During the 20-year US war in Afghanistan, it carried out less than 3,000 strikes a year on a country twice the size of the UK versus a country 3/4 the size of New Jersey now has received over 14,000 Israeli strikes. I think it's just important for people to understand that, to understand the level of destruction on such a tiny country that already has dilapidating infrastructure, that already was suffering an economic collapse like no other. My NGO, in addition to thousands of other Lebanese, lost money in the banks. We had a financial crisis in 2019. We're a broke country. How this is going to cost billions to rebuild. For me, it's sort of like ceasefire. Thank God, no more people will die, at least for the next 60 days. We'll see who holds their end of the deal. But now that the dust has settled, it's like this reality I've been petrified to face and I've been studying every day, but I know now we're all having to face that. And I guess I just really want your listeners to just imagine that level of destruction. And I know we see these horrific videos on social media, and thank God we have social media to really expose that. But imagine your city, a city you love. It doesn't even have to be the city you're from, any city that you've been attached to in your life. I want everyone here to just imagine that city having missiles strike the center of a civilian residential building where families live, where there's balconies with plants and toys of children. Imagine that happening every night. Imagine it happening every day. How do you live from that? Now that the dust is settled, what are you going to go back to? Thousands of displaced families are now returning because they want to see what is left, if anything, of their homes. So I guess I just think that's really important to put into context of the ceasefire, that we have a lot of work to do. And we cannot let Israel get away with this anymore. I'm sorry, I'm going to go out and say it, but I think Israel should be expelled from the United Nations. No other member state of the UN, I used to work at the UN, has so not only violated so many rules and laws, which other countries violate human rights, but has just humiliated and just spat in the face of the UN. The outgoing ambassador shredded up the UN Charter in front of the entire General Assembly with a little paper shredder, like a little brat. This is just ridiculous behavior. But going into the concrete things, Israel has struck UN schools, UN hospitals. They attacked the Lebanese peacekeepers in the south of Lebanon, UNIFIL, the United Nations Interim Forces of Lebanon, that are there to keep the peace on the blue line. What excuse do you have? How does the UN continue to accept this? And if we're going to move forward, if we're going to say the ceasefire is good, I will only say it's good if we accept that we stop dealing with this behavior, that the Western nations hold accountable their puppet that they have in the region. You have all of the power of the US, you have all of the power of France and UK. And one step in that direction, again, the ICC warrants, is that many European countries are saying, well, we have to uphold it. If Netanyahu steps foot in our soil, we will arrest him. That is a great step forward. But I will only be excited about a ceasefire when I see that we start to really process and hold accountable these unacceptable actions that are happening on civilians, on families, not on Hezbollah strongholds.
How does the UN, after they have violated so many laws, what do they have to do to be expelled? Is there such a thing?
I mean, it's a complicated question because I think the UN was set out to do a lot more, like take a bigger bite than it could chew. I think the only ways to make that happen is Security Council reform, which is a constant agenda issue that is raised at the UN. What that means is the Security Council has 15 members, five of which are the permanent members, which we know is the US, the UK, Russia, China, and France. They have veto power. That means any resolution can get vetoed if one person raises their hand. And we saw the United States of America raise their hand 5 times to veto the Gaza ceasefire. 5 times. I mean, even the UK, even France, I mean, at that point. But then on the flip side of it, I will be the first to also say Russia vetoed constant resolutions when Syria was under vicious Russian bombardment. I mean, our region, we are not independent. We are not sovereign. We're either bombed by the Israelis or by the Russians or by someone else. But it's not like you see us taking, being able to take this into our own hands. But so anyway, back to the reform of the Security Council means this is a ridiculous law now, that these 5 countries just kind of hold hostage the UN Security Council system, which is supposed to promote international peace and security. So some nations that have been at the forefront of this have been Brazil, India, South Africa, all of these countries saying we need to diversify, because then the 10 countries are rotating. So when I was representing Lebanon in the Security Council, we were the rotational one Arab seat. Latin America gets some seats, Africa, Southeast Asia, to try to represent the world. But as you see, the permanent 5 hold the clutches, which is really Russia, China, these France, UK, and US. So to answer you, I think if we had reform where we included other permanent members that represented the global South and the Eastern world, I think that would balance things out. And I think we have seen very impressive actions by countries like South Africa. I mean, look, they took the genocide case to the ICJ. And I also encourage people, if they've never read the report, despite that it is 60 pages, to look into it or to find, AJ Plus, Al Jazeera Plus. There's plenty of material that summarizes things into short bits if you don't want to take the time to read it. But that was a very mature, very impressive legal document where they documented the war crimes. They cited all their evidence. 5 pages of that report, 5 pages alone, were dedicated to genocidal statements by Israeli leaders themselves. 5 pages of just military generals, the Prime Minister of Israel, saying with glee that they want to exterminate the people of Gaza. So going back, a country like South Africa, I think, has demonstrated that it is more than capable of being a permanent member.
A lot of people will say, oh, but the situation there is so complicated. How do you see this ending? Like, first of all, do you think it's complicated? And do you have hope that it will end one day? And what does that look like? Okay, that was a 3-part question.
Yes, and I will answer in 2 short parts. So, on the one hand, to take a very firm and simple stance that yes, genocide is happening is not a complicated position to reach, to come to as an individual person. That is not complicated. That is a question of, if you know that over 15,000, now maybe 20 or 30,000 children have been murdered, more than the past 5 years of conflict combined anywhere in the world, all across the world. If you know that over 180,000 civilians have been slaughtered, hospitals have been besieged in Gaza. I mean, this is not complicated. It was one of the most difficult days I'll never forget in Al Shifa Hospital when we had the reports of Israeli tanks circling hospital, sniping at nurses through the windows, entering and arresting the doctors and executing patients and leaving babies off of their incubators to die. Is that complicated? I mean, look, I don't watch any of these movies or shows, Hunger Games or whatever. Sometimes people make these comparisons, so I can't make them because I don't watch that stuff. But I mean, this is like a horror movie. If you watch a horror movie, is it complicated who's the bad guy? So for that,
No.
my answer to you is people really need to, that shouldn't be a complicated position to take. Yes, a genocide is happening. Yes, there is an intent to ethnically cleanse. But number 2, as a scholar of the Middle East, as someone who, I have 2 degrees, I graduated with honors from the Middle East Studies Department. I've read so many books, and yes, there's different positions on various. I mean, just the Lebanese civil war is one of the most complicated things that has happened in the region and has had personal divisions for me with family members on different sides. And so, yes, there is a lot of complicated history. And on the flip side, I said, oh, it's great we have social media, right, to see the horrors of war crimes documented. But then the bad side is sometimes people just take a snippet out of context and they think that they're an expert and that they can speak. Oh, well, Hamas did this, or oh, well, this happened. It's like, well, did you know that Israel helped fund Hamas? Did you know that Israel helped divide the Palestinian political movement by funding? And they've admitted to it. It's in a Wall Street Journal article from 1994. You can find it in the archives of the Wall Street Journal. Maybe now they'll take it down, but that, like if you don't understand these nuances, if you don't read the history, you're also kind of, I don't want to say insulting, but those who have spent their lives studying it. I speak Arabic. I've lived in the region in different parts of Lebanon, Syria, Egypt. So there's some places that the experts should be allowed to speak about. And I think what a lot of experts will agree, to answer you, is that the way to peace is that there needs to be a Palestinian state. This is the solution to so much violence and to so many problems. And you've actually even had various other regional leaders been saying this, and I wish they would have said it before because we've needed this for a long time. When people say, oh, but what's the solution? There's a ceasefire, people start fighting again. I mean, people have to remember the Palestinians don't have their own state yet. So it's great that we're recognizing Palestine, that people are waving the flags in protest. 146 countries recognize the Palestinian state. When I was at the UN on behalf of Lebanon, I put together the legal argument as to how Palestine participates in so many international economic bodies, international cultural bodies, is a clear global player, and has all of the elements to be a state, but they don't have self-determination. Israel controls every aspect of their lives. So when people want to blame who they want to blame, oh, but Hamas governance, do you know what Gaza was like before 2023, which I hate to even reference as a point of anything because, being under siege where Israel controls the amount of calories that are allowed on a truck inside Gaza, when Israel prevents cancer medicine from entering Gaza, it prevents chocolate, stops the fishermen on their nautical miles from fishing in their own territory. I mean, these people didn't have any self-governance, any right to feed their children, to go to schools that they want to travel. They weren't allowed to leave, to go travel the world, to go study abroad. I mean, we have to, and same the West Bank, I'm not even gonna get started there, but they also control. I mean, there's been some great activists and Black scholars from the US that went there and were like, wait a minute, is this complicated or is this apartheid like what happened in the US when there was segregation? For them, they were like, this is the exact same thing, but more brutal and more violent. The South Africans said the apartheid was more brutal, more violent than their apartheid. Anyway, a Palestinian state, I think, is the path to peace. I also think Lebanon needs to have its entire sovereignty. So in this ceasefire, the Israelis are supposed to pull out south of the Litani River in the next 60 days. Hezbollah is also supposed to withdraw, and the Lebanese army is supposed to enter. And this is the plan: 5,000 troops of the Lebanese army, 60 days to prove that this will happen. It's sort of like a 2-month halt. And the Litani River has been very contentious. It's also a major water source for Lebanon, for the Lebanese. So Lebanon needs entire sovereignty. Lebanon needs to have its borders respected. I mean, again, it's very rich of the French president and all these other ministers to be like, oh, we believe in Lebanese sovereignty, while they allowed Israel to just barge in and just kill and pillage and destroy at will. And now you should go back after you, if you want Lebanese sovereignty, I think also is critical to keeping peace and to having a path for justice.
I want to go back for a second and talk about Palestine and the UN. Excuse my ignorance. They are not recognized as a state, correct?
So they have the statehood. They have the statehood status, but they need to be officially the Palestinian member state of the UN. So there's
And what does that mean?
So essentially, all of the nations need to recognize that that when it makes the bid, it gets accepted and it gets voted on. So it does need the majority. to accept.
Is Palestine recognized as a sovereign state?
So the state of Palestine is recognized as a sovereign state by 146 countries. Spain, Norway, and I think Ireland recently joined in June of this year. But there's 193 official member states of the UN. So right now, Palestine actually has a limited status as a non-member observer state, so it does not have the same voting rights in the General Assembly. This is due, again, back to the veto power that we discussed. Essentially, the Security Council would have to approve a new permanent member. And obviously, the US keeps vetoing this from happening.
And do all of the countries have to approve for it to be recognized?
The Security Council has to approve.
The Security Council, okay.
And it has, again, over 75% of the General Assembly members. So, I mean, look, I think it would be a step in the direction of Palestine statehood, but I also wouldn't put all of my hope into one UN resolution. That obviously many resolutions get violated. So what really needs to happen is that Israel commits in peace talks to actually to ending the occupation. This is when I said like a little while ago when you're asking me about the peace path, statehood means ending the occupation, and Israel, like, there needs to be concrete actions on the ground. It'd be great if the UN votes for it and that they have their voting rights, but we need Israel to withdraw from the West Bank and withdraw from Gaza and actually be honest and legitimate in upholding a state where they have their own government and their own self-determination.
I want to ask if you think, I mean, you know, I am a hopeful person, but do you see that day coming? What needs to happen?
Of course I do. Look, I'm 35 years old. I've lived through a lot, but a lot more can happen. I mean, the unpredictability of the world, global pandemic, a genocide, things can happen that maybe others don't predict. So I don't like to play the game of like, oh, it's not, I believe it will happen in my lifetime. And I also believe, that beyond like what we wish to happen is we need concrete actions. We can't just keep, spinning the wheel and having, I don't know, it's being passive. And I think what's happened is unfortunately, that it was a genocide, but I think what happened is there was an awakening, I think, among people who live in the West, who I don't think through any fault of their own, maybe were unaware of what was truly happening. I think this also signals a revolution needed in education and in media. I mean, the media, when we look back on this in history, the same way we look back on the Holocaust, we're like, oh, these people were Nazi sympathizers, or these people were abetting in genocide, like newspapers that were putting out certain headlines. I think we will look back, and anyone that lied, which was a lot of the Western media, and I mean lie, not like propaganda twisted the headline, but still said the truth, lied, will be seen as aiding and abetting this genocide. And people it's been exposed. I mean, people weren't falling for it. And you have unbelievable brave journalists coming out. I mean, Israel also, to add to the list of war crimes, has killed more journalists than in any other recent conflict. They have killed more aid workers, and actually, going back to why they should be kicked out of the UN, they have killed the highest number of UN personnel in any single conflict in its history, which is over 228 UN personnel killed. I mean, the behavior has just been out of control. I mean, we if we go back, we have the whole list of so many atrocities, but one of them including the World Aid, sorry, the name, those aid workers that were killed, some were from Australia, World Food Kitchen, that the strike, I mean, the image is so striking because it's like the whole of the missile through the roof of their car, a clearly marked car, World Food Kitchen, like volunteers. You saw this young girl with this big, beautiful smile, excited to go volunteer in Gaza, and she was killed. And so these were very intentional. They're bombing, in terms of assassinating journalists and aid workers. Sorry, to go back to your question, I think people have become awakened, and I think that they're frustrated that they have their own problems. Americans, anyone who lives in the US, there are so many challenges here in the US. There's so much that people, paying a lot of taxes every year, taken away from their hard-earned paycheck and income, expect that at least some of it should be invested in their communities. And of course, some of it is, but to justify $9 billion going to the Israeli military, um, just in like a couple months, rewarding them for bombing Lebanon, over 20 billion over the course of its history. I mean, FEMA, the hurricane relief, announcing a $9 billion shortfall after the horrific storms that devastated homes in North Carolina and Florida. I mean, come on. People are like, you can do better than this. I mean, the Biden administration announcing $750 per family to recuperate after like, are you kidding me? In the US, what is that going to buy? A month's groceries? Barely? I mean, that's why I feel we're all connected. This isn't just like, oh, Palestine and Lebanon, and you can see these as separate issues and it's foreign, it doesn't concern me. Well, I mean, people see that it does concern them and they're frustrated. And I've also seen some incredible veterans come out and speak out. And that has been beautiful to see, again, this sort of collectivity. That's why I have hope, to answer your question. I mean, some of these veterans have given some very beautiful speeches. They're like, look, I served war. This isn't it. And not only is this not it, this is like, insulting and offending our great country that we love called the United States of America, and that we believe we served for something good. And, how dare you? How dare you jeopardize like everything that these veterans risked with their mental health, with their physical health, with their lives, feeling that they're serving a country that upholds certain values. I think at the end of the day, values is what this is all coming down to, because the values are now directly correlated to well-being. So I do have hope. I think there will be a great future ahead. People are aware, people are exposed, and I think it's just a matter of time before people realize the tools and resources that they have to make action.
Alexandra, what do you think? Do you think the situation is going to get better or worse with the new president coming in next year?
So all I can say, and I'm just saying my personal opinion as a Lebanese and an American, I'm just happy that it's not the same administration that has conducted a 12-month genocide. Now, again, 13, 14 months. I find it, and anyone that would have tried to tell me, oh, it's going to be worse. I don't know. I don't want to talk negative, actually. I want to change the course of that, because people who say that to me, like, I can't tell you how much it gives me an internal just like hurt and rage. Like, how dare you even think that you can say that to my face, or say that to anyone who's had to watch our homelands and our families been murdered, not just murdered in the most vicious, disgusting ways. I mean, tents burned alive in Gaza. I mean, the hospitals, there's no hospitals left. But doctors were committed to serving the people in Gaza, that they put up tents and did what they could with the little medical supplies they had. A man on an IV, a young man, 19 years old, who loved to play guitar and who was an engineering student and who dreamed of, dreams like any other 19-year-old, was burned alive while attached to an IV. I mean, how does it get worse? Are we not human to you people? Is that not like enough for you to realize, like, oh, but it could, like, if that, like, we're humans too. It doesn't get worse to treat a human that way than that. That honestly, roll the dice, anyone else. I don't care who it is. Anyone but this administration that has blood on their hands for aiding and abetting a Holocaust, a genocide. Holocaust, which Israeli Holocaust scholars have used that word. We can't, not one person has a monopoly over that. There has been a Holocaust in Armenia. There has been a Holocaust now. So come what may, I can't with good faith have been celebratory if it was the same administration repeating itself. That would have sent a very dangerous message to the world.
I agree. Oh man, this
Sorry
is
for the emotions.
no, I love your passion, and it you have a love and care for humanity, which we're missing in this world. This is normal. I think we should all be angry. That's the truth. I think we should all just, it's difficult to fathom that this is happening in 2024 and that people are getting away with it. That's all I'm going to
getting
say.
away with it. And I think, again, why my belief comes back is thousands of people marching in the streets doing what they know they can do best. I mean, what other options do some people have? Again, going back to middle income, lower income families in the US, the UK, and France, people who know their country is aiding and abetting. I mean, and you've seen amazing actions of, Belgian workers in the cargoes that refused to dock the ships with the Israeli weapons. You've seen young Americans in California blocking the ships that were supposed to go with arms to Israel. I mean, doing what they can with their arms and legs and voices. And these are average Americans or average Europeans that have everything to lose. They could get fired, they can be blacklisted by certain companies, which is insane that the US is no longer this free speech country, that like it's becoming this dictatorial style. Like if you don't agree with whatever APAC says, you can lose your job, you can get fired, you can worse, be arrested. In Canada, that was happening. In Germany, if you wear a kufiya. But anyway, my point is the small but they're large actions. Even at some of the arms corporations in England, some young people got arrested for protesting and refusing to get up, saying that these weapons are going to slaughter families and children. So, I mean, I applaud those actions, those people. They are brothers and sisters of the human family. And, this is not acceptable. And I think people are doing the most that they can with what little and great tools that they have at their disposal.
So, what can the average American, European, Westerner do?
So, have you heard of BDS?
Yes.
So
Let's
BDS
tell our audience what it is.
Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions. It's a movement founded by Mahmoud Barghouti, who's still actually serving a prison sentence. But anyway, I could now get on a sidetrack about how so many brilliant Palestinian political leaders are in prison or dead. When people are like, oh, where's the Palestinian Gandhi? I'm like, maybe he was shot, or maybe he was tortured and raped, by the way, to add to the crimes of what Israel has done. They gang raped a doctor. Anyway, sorry, I don't mean to go on sidetracks, but whenever moment I can to let people really know what's actually happening and just how cruel and vicious this has been. But anyway, BDS, Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions, is you can just go to the website, and it's a global movement, and it was inspired by other boycott movements that helped liberate South Africa. But the important thing to know is that the Israeli army and the US government and the UK government and the German government are not doing this alone. They have the support and the investment by lots of corporations, and by lots of products maybe that you're buying that you don't realize that invest in the the burning of Lebanese villages or the burning of Palestinian villages. So there's basic products you can choose not to buy. And I know that doesn't seem like a big thing, but for example, just yesterday, I think it was, or the day before, Puma announced that it is no longer going to be a sponsor of the Israeli military and the Israeli settlement active project, which is colonization, essentially, and colony building. I don't know why, I don't know if settlement's a nicer word, but these are colonies. Puma, I mean, this is a massive sports brand that really felt the impact of it started in 2018, the campaign. And so maybe it took a couple of years, but things can happen very quickly where they're really feeling the burn. I mean, Starbucks and McDonald's branches have had to close down across Israel and across other parts of the world due to losses of profits. So your decision making with your consumer choices can actually make a difference in the liberation of the oppressed people. So that's one thing. I am also part of many groups. Well, to finish, also what the BDS stands for. So the divestment is really, again, getting. So if you remember the student encampment protests that they like to call them, oh, terrorist sympathizers or whatever, which is insane. I mean, I'm quite ashamed of my Columbia administration, but I'm extremely proud of those students that started the encampments. If you actually watch some of the interviews with these amazing young students, they have very clear demands and they know exactly what they were asking for. They weren't just saying and genocide and just sitting out there for, and the genocide, whatnot. They were requesting that one, the administrations of the universities reveal where their endowments and where they invest in, again, the BDS divestments part, and two, if they're affiliated with the Israeli military in any way or other arms corporations that export violence across the globe, whether it's in Africa or the Middle East, that they immediately divest and decide, hey, there's plenty of other places you can invest your money. And it's not that the universities don't need money for scholarships. You see a lot of pushback where people are like, oh, but they need this money to offer scholarships. Well, there's plenty of other brilliant ways you can invest your money, whether it's in tech or so many, it doesn't have to be an arms corporation. So those are the demands of some of the students that were met in various universities. I know Brown University finally agreed to a meeting where they would listen to a presentation by the students and see what their demands were. I think, I'm sorry to our listeners, I'm not going to get it right, but a university in California, I have it somewhere written in my journal of notes. I don't know if it was, I can't remember which university, but there was a university in California that also divested from Israeli military and settlement building. So your actions make a difference. And another way to look at it, if they didn't, why would they try to silence us? Um,
True.
a last point I'll say, and although I know it's a more difficult, well, not more difficult one, but maybe a longer road, is calling your senators and calling your representatives. I'm in this WhatsApp group where I get every day, they're really encouraging us to call. Here's websites to find the phone number, right? They give you a script. It's very easy, or just email. Any pressure you can put on your political leaders at a local level, they will make a difference. You know, Bernie Sanders put forward a bill to halt arms to Israel. Bernie Sanders, who I believe is Jewish anyway, like this just kind of proves how much this is about anti-Zionism, not anti-Semitism. And donate and support groups on the ground that are trying to, you know, save lives and help children have a better future and help parents take care of their families. There's so many ways. There's so much to do. I think that if we didn't have all that, we'd sit back in our grief and depression. But there's just so much that you can do, organize in your home town or wherever you are, connect with other groups, connect with people in Palestine and Lebanon, support organizations. There's a lot to do.
Well, you talked about helping children, and that's what you do with your nonprofit, Azaid. Let's talk about how you got into that, and I want to hear all about it.
Sure. So, Azahir is my pride of my life, my baby that um, really my team on the ground continues to impress me every day. So, as I said, we started about 10 years ago, where our mission is child protection, psychosocial supports, which is PSS. I'll try not to use too many, you know, NGO acronyms, and education, as well as empowering youth. So our two kind of focus groups is the children and the youth, but then thereby the community at large. So we're really a community-based organization, which means I went into these communities and I got to know the young people as my friends. I spent time eating dinners in their homes, sleeping in their homes, just getting to know them and not really having it be like a aid beneficiary transactional relationship, but more of like a friendship one to build trust. And then from there, I'm like, okay, let's start doing some projects. What ideas do you have? And children was always just a passion of mine, you know. I mean, I think anyone anywhere in the world can tell you a child brings light, a child brings love into a room they enter, into the world. They have such a presence. So children, if they're okay, they can help their communities be okay. And I think what's often forgotten in the humanitarian world is if you're just reading a report, you'll think, okay, we need food and medicine and water. Sure, we do need those things, but more as important as that, which is what I learned on the ground, is their mental health, is their ability to be a child again. I mean, I would see 5-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 9-year-olds acting like the boss of the camp, you know, holding a young baby infant on their hip, coming up to me like, "What do you want?" You know, like "Shubadak," like I'm the boss. I'm just like with a cigarette, like I don't know, like all of this stuff that it's like they've been robbed of their childhood due to the circumstances. And it was just so important to create a safe space where children, and that's why we built two community centers, one in the Palestinian camp Nahr al-Bared in the north of Tripoli, and another in a remote Lebanese village called Tel Mayan, which is in Akkad along the Syrian border. Akkad also, again, this is a province of the most suffering economically in the country, so why I was drawn to it. And in these remote villages, we're the only NGO present. So if we're not there, you know, they're not really getting support from anywhere else. But for me, it was important to one, create a safe space. I recognize that there's a lack of spaces, just physical space. And two, these spaces are now beautiful, vibrant centers of education, these PSS, psychosocial activities, and also cultural activities. So we do Debke dance, which is super fun. We learn about, the tradition and culture and history of Palestinian and Lebanese heritage. We do chess, which is great for critical thinking, and we love sports. We do a lot of football. We have unbelievable stars on our team: Nadine, Tariq, Hamoudi, Isra, Dua, these guys, Kusai, they know how to take a football match, a soccer, sorry, and make it more than just about the sport. So they've been trained, professionally trained, as to how to use soccer or football as a means for life skills development. So through the activities, they're teaching the children communication, self-confidence, critical thinking, collaboration, all of these important life skills for the children to develop healthily and to prevent disorders.
And you have locals trained, right, to help sustain your program.
Exactly. So that's kind of why, for me now I'm traveling around the world speaking about Ezahir essentially is I would love to be on the ground 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It's my favorite place to be, but I owe it to Ezahir to be that kind of international representative. I am obviously the founder and director, but I now have a great team of Ezahir ambassadors, I'm calling them, of friends of mine who have decided to join the cause and from where they are in Europe or the US or Latin America, represent us, fundraise for us. I mean, we need to raise money, we need to raise awareness. So I was just in Mexico City doing that. I'll be, East Coast, West Coast of the US, London. It's important to bring awareness. People are into the cause, and they just sometimes don't know where to turn. So for me, it was important that I play that role and leave in the hands, the great hands of my team, all of that, everything on the ground, and it's theirs. The team in Nahr al-Bared, they're Palestinian youth. The team in Akkad and Tel Mayan, they're Lebanese youth. This is their community. So no one can handle it better than them.
So you're going around the world. You're moving to Mexico City, I believe, right?
That is the plan.
And why Mexico City?
Few reasons. So, one hand, there's a very large Lebanese Mexican community. Um, I was very incredible to meet a lot of Mexicans who are maybe second or third generation Lebanese. They're very passionate about Lebanon. They want to help. But I think in the global diaspora network, which, the Lebanese are very strong at doing, we've kind of neglected Latin America. Not intentionally, I don't think, sorry, neglect is not the right word, but the Lebanese diaspora has been so busy from the moment Lebanese were forced to flee their country, in Europe and Africa and Nigeria and Australia and the United States, that's where there was just an immediate diaspora action. And the language thing was major because these were first generation, like my parents, I'm first generation. So Arabic speakers constantly going back to Lebanon. Um, so for them, it was easier to sort of, I guess, mobilize. For the Latin American Lebanese, it's like they don't speak Arabic. They weren't born there. They sometimes go visit, but there's sort of that geographic and linguistic barrier that I'm really passionate about kind of breaking and just connecting us. I mean, we're a more connected world than ever. Um, and so on the one hand, yeah, I want to connect with the Lebanese descendants and starting in Mexico, but I know they're in Venezuela and Brazil, Colombia. And then the second thing is just the atmosphere of, of supporting Palestinian sovereignty, of ending the genocide. Just last week I was at the Mexican Chamber of Deputies, which is essentially like their Congress, and just saw these politicians, like Mexican members of Congress, that were just behind the podium, delivering very inspiring, powerful speeches about how Palestine needs to be liberated and that the Mexican people are supporting of them and that, the aggression on Lebanon needs to end. And for me, that's a huge solidarity that we need. And I'm excited to be somewhere where I can actually, politically, it's a bit more along the way of the direction of where I believe we should be going. Yeah.
So your day to day involves raising money for
Raising
Azahir?
money, raising awareness. I have some friends in Mexico City that started raising funds for us even when I wasn't there, which is amazing. Again, it's like going back to what I was saying before about how people are showing up in the streets, people care, and sometimes people just are look like I mean, I'm just so blessed and touched by the reception about what Azahir does to these people. I mean, my Mexican friends who met me once were like, this is an amazing effort, and they fundraised like that, a couple hundred, and I was just, so touched, but also, I mean, I'm not surprised that people relate to what Azahir is doing because it is so grassroots. It's all about the children, and we're very effective. We're very effective with very little resources. Or like we stretch, I guess, the size of the dollar is what I'm trying to say. For example, an initiative my youth took up on their own after the displacement crisis started. So we have over, just in the Palestinian camp, 3,000 displaced families. That it went from 200 to 2,000 to 3,000 in a couple weeks, displaced from Beirut and the south and other parts of the country. So in addition to obviously distributing mattresses and baby milk and diapers and necessary aid, because they are psychosocial experts and specialists, they decided the children need psychological first aid, which is something maybe a lot of people don't know what it is, but it's essentially trying to prevent the long-term psychological disorders that children are extremely sensitive to in these critical times. And there's a set of 7 principles, and there's a set of steps, and there's a proper, because also an untrained intervention with the children could unintentionally harm their development and their healing. So my team was like, okay, we know how to do this. And there's a lot of other youth around us. They don't know how to do it, but they want to help. So we've been doing trainings, 3-day training, 6 hours a day on psychological first aid, on PSS, where my youth is training other youth so that they can go volunteer down to the schools where families are sheltering and offer psychological activities for the children, dressed up in clown outfits, doing games. And I'm just so proud of them. Again, to take that initiative, it didn't cost a lot of money. And again, using what we have, which is our bodies and our minds, to learn how to do this activity with the kids. We're about to go down to Tripoli and do another one this week. So shout out to any organizations in Lebanon, which we are connecting with, but we're always happy to partner with anyone that wants to learn this skill that we are specialized in. So yeah, I mean, if we can heal the children, and they will heal us. So
Wow. I find myself saying wow a lot.
no,
Uh, it's so incredible, your love and passion and this cause that you're doing. It's so inspiring. It really is. And I hope that this podcast will get your name out there, help get your name out there, and that people will want to help in any way that they can. Before we go, our time is kind of coming to an end, but I always like to end with asking my guest what is either, a misconception about the Arab world or Arabs, or what you want our Western audience to know about Arabs or the Arab world.
this is a fun one. Um, so I guess I'll start. Look, I'm a Lebanese Christian. Uh, and the reason I'm saying that is that what I'm going to answer relates to the Muslim community. I think there's a ginormous, ginormous misconception about the Muslim world, with that term involving other non-Arabic countries like Malaysia and Indonesia and other places. But the Arab world, that is mixed, Christian, Muslim, and Jew. But, you know, for some reason, when it comes to Arab Muslims, I think there's a big misconception. I don't want to use the word Islamophobia because I don't want to accuse anyone of something that it's not their fault. I mean, we've been fed by Hollywood, we've been fed by movies that the villain is either a Muslim Arab or a Russian, right? So it's kind of been shoved down throats that women are so subjugated, and especially the women issue. Um, I, I would encourage people, if you can, with your resources, to travel. I'm not going to say anything. You know what? Don't let me speak on behalf of the Arab countries or Muslim communities or Christian communities. Just go if you can. I know it's expensive and far, but I promise you it's worth it, because it will just shatter any misconception that you have. There is no more gentle people that I've experienced in my life than the Arab people. They're vibrant for life in the way that I think a lot of Latinos and Americans and Europeans are as well. I mean, they love their culture and pride, but then there's this gentleness and this sweetness that I just want people to experience. And if you can't fly there, there's a lot of Arab communities probably in your own neighborhood, in your own backyard. I mean, you can go to Brooklyn, you can go to Patterson, New Jersey, you can go to Texas where you are. I mean, you can find an Arab community probably around you somewhere if you're in the US or in Europe, and go and meet them. And I promise you, you won't be disappointed. I promise it will be worth it.
I feel like I've been crying a lot in my podcasts. because, yeah, I mean, they are so misunderstood and misrepresented and dehumanized. And I hate it because I'm going to say it again. Arabs are some of the kindest people I have ever met, and they have the biggest hearts, and they're so loyal and so loving and so
Hospitable.
communal. And what
Yeah.
was that?
Sorry, I didn't interrupt. So hospitable in that sense too. Like they love to serve
Hospitable,
their guests. Like they love it. Be prepared to eat.
generous. Yes, yes. Just it's incredible. So yeah, go. That's a great message. Alexandra, where can people find you?
Now you're making me cry. I'm sorry. It's just a very. I woke up today and it was just like, oh my God, the ceasefire, and I'm going to talk to you, and it's a lot. So since this is a podcast about humanizing, I'm going to let myself be a little vulnerable. Where to find me on LinkedIn? Hey, you can email me. ajt@azahir.org is my Azahir email. On LinkedIn, I'm actually Alexandra Jacqueline Dame. Jacqueline, my wonderful grandmother's name from Tripoli, Lebanon, my dad's mother. On Instagram, I need to change my handle. It's too long. It's Alexandra underscore 961 for Lebanon underscore PL. So, and for Azahir's Instagram, it's just at azahir.63 because that is our registration number with Lebanon, and Azahir was, I think, taken. But anyway, LinkedIn, email me, follow Azahir, please. That's another way you can help in this world of social media. It helps us a lot if you follow us and like us and comment, because it kind of shows to people we ask money for, like for grants. Like I'm literally giving you a concrete reason why this stuff matters. It's not just that we want to be cool and have likes, is that it helps us when we apply for a big grant, that the grantee sees that we have a lot of following and people liking our content. So please, that helps a lot. And thank you. Thank you so much. And don't
Thank
hesitate. Any
you.
questions? You want to get involved more in any way? Politically, legally, humanitarianly. Those are my specialties. So
Thank you for allowing me to pick your brain. Thank you for your passion. Thank you for being you. Thank you for helping the children. Thank you for being so entertaining. And, I learned so much. I hope our audience did too. If you liked this podcast, please like, subscribe, follow, comment, review, anything you can to my podcast as well as Azahid. Anything you guys can do to help. It really helps the cause. Alexandra, thank you so much. And I really found a new friend in you, and I can't wait to meet you in person.
it's gonna be
And
amazing.
hopefully, inshallah, it'll be next year in 2025.
Inshallah, I'll see you in Beirut this Christmas. How
Oh,
about that?
too soon, too soon. I would love to, but 2025. Let's aim for 2025. Thank
Deal.
you so much. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
this opportunity. God bless you.
Thank you. You too.